Thanks, Grieva, and thank you very much. I suppose the first thing I want to say is happy birthday, Trócaire. And I've been pleased over the last 18 years to have had, I suppose, an official relationship with Trócaire through my work in Irish Aid. Before that, I worked as a doctor in Uganda, and I was very glad to be a recipient of a Trócaire grant for a community-based HIV/AIDS program, for which we implemented over 2 years. And I think that experience, to me, in many ways, embodies very much what Trócaire is about in terms of working with marginalised communities and working with good locally based organisations, in working very strongly in important issues that are relevant to poverty in those situations, and of augmenting international resources with local commitment and locally generated resources. So well done on that, and that mission, I think, is as relevant today in many ways as it has been 40 years ago. My job is to present a bit of an Irish perspective to our discussions today, to say a little bit about how we're critiquing the Millennium Development Goals, how our thinking in terms of the development aid programme of Irish Aid is changing, how our thinking is evolving in line with the discussions on the post-2015 discussions, to say a little bit about how we're reflecting that in our presidency of the European Council, and then I'll finish up with one or two general comments. First of all, to say that in terms of the relevance of the Millennium Development Goals, they have been thought to be very relevant in terms of the government's approach to international cooperation, a useful framework around which we should plan our expenditure programmes, a useful framework to hold the international community accountable for progress, and a useful framework for communicating the achievements or where areas where further progress has yet to be made. And the Millennium Development Goals are well reflected in the government's white paper in Irish Aid, which was published in 2006. And a lot of the priorities that fell out of that are work in HIV, other communicable diseases, gender equality, education, are very much shaped around trying to see what contribution that Ireland can make to the international development targets. But things are changing, and we've heard all of that in previous speakers. And we need to evolve and remain relevant to that changing context. And in that sense, it was fortuitous that last year the government conducted a review of the 2006 White Paper. And that was useful for two reasons. I think, first of all, because it helped us to talk to our partners in Ireland and overseas and get their views on the extent that Ireland's programme was relevant to the needs of today's world. I think, secondly, it allowed us to basically get a sense about, look at the changing context, look what's happening globally in our partner countries and in Ireland, and to see are we fit for purpose in the way in which the programme is being planned and delivered. Ronan Murphy is there in the audience, and he was one of the external advisory group that oversaw that process. And we're hoping that that's going to be published and launched within the next few weeks. But I think that consultation process, which was very substantial, we met over 1,000 people. We got submissions from over 165 groups in Ireland and abroad, was instructive in helping us identify issues which are important for Irish people in terms of the future of development cooperation. And in that context, it was instructive in helping to inform how the Irish government needs to engage with the post-2015 discussions. And just to give a flavour of some of the issues that have come up in those discussions and their relevance to today's discussion. First of all, despite our economic downturn, there is incredibly strong support in Ireland for continued support in international cooperation. Few dissenting voices, but very, very strong support. I think, secondly, there's a broadening of a constituency of actors in Ireland that are interested in and engaged with development cooperation. So we're seeing a broadening with higher education institutes, credit unions, private sector, other government departments, all expressing an interest in seeing how they can contribute to Ireland's mission on development. I think, thirdly, there's been a recognition that even at difficult economic times in Ireland, we've managed to maintain our level of expenditure at around 0.5% of GNI. And that involves difficult political decisions. And I think, secondly, related to that, there's a recognition that we are talking about money, but in the next phase, we have to think beyond money. And we have to think in terms of political influence, institutional links, generation and communication of knowledge, all around the partnership approach. It doesn't mean we forget about the money, but it means we link the political dimension with it. And I think that it concurs with what John was saying. I think fourthly, there was a recognition that in the future we need to keep a very sharp poverty focus to the programme. And we need to keep it untied, and we need to make sure that the quality of that programme remains strong. That doesn't mean that we need to continue everything that we've been doing to date. And there were gaps, and I think these gaps really relate to a lot of the thinking that's out there about what the gaps are in responding to the needs of partner countries. That we need to look at a much stronger human rights perspective, that we need to incorporate a commitment to equality across our development cooperation programme, that we need to strengthen institutions with strengthening relationships with Irish institutions, the need to incorporate the 3 dimensions of sustainable development that have been spoken about, and the need not to neglect the importance of economic development and supporting the creation of jobs. I mean, there are some of the issues from those consultations that I wanted to share with you because they are, I think, instructive in terms of informing our own position in the processes. So how is Ireland then relating to those international discussions and processes that are in place around the Millennium Development Goals? I think firstly we are playing a proactive role. We are quite engaged with the work of the UN task team and have very strong relationships, particularly through the UK, with the high-level panel. We have tried to make sure that Ireland's presidency of the European Council and the presidency of the G8 by the UK present an opportunity for influence. Our ambassador in New York, our permanent representative to the United Nations, has been asked to co-facilitate the September review of the MDGs together with the permanent representative from South Africa. And she's playing a very important role in helping to shape the actual structure and outputs of that event. We are also in a constituency group with Norway and Denmark, with one of the seats on the Open Working Group. Thankfully, it's starting to meet at last. The first meeting was last week, and we're hoping again to work with other groupings there to push an agenda which I'll share with you now. We also are quite involved in the thematic discussions and country consultations. And in all of our embassies and development missions, we have instigated a country-specific consultation with governments, civil society partners and other partners to get an understanding of what are the issues on the ground for our partners. And I know Trócaire today is sharing lessons from their learning experience, but we have put that in train, and we want that to inform our position. And we are committed to ensuring that voice, and I think it was strongly indicated earlier on, is instrumental and significant in the way the new framework is being shaped. What are the kind of characteristics of Ireland's approach to date? Just let me mention a few of them. I think first of all is we want to stand back and listen and not run in with a solution. And I think we are determined to basically hold our horses in coming up with a national position too early. I think secondly, we want to be clear that the discussions on post-2015 do not distract us from the work that needs to be done between now and then to deliver on the commitments made in 2000. There's more work to be done, and we need to focus on that as well as focusing beyond that. I think thirdly, we really strongly want to ensure that there's a convergence of the process, of the UN process by the high-level panel and the open working group, and that we work towards a single set of goals to emerge from those. I think arising out of that, we basically we have tried to make sure that that issue is percolating a lot of our discussions in the European Union. During the last month, we had a meeting of informal development ministers here in Dublin, and basically that is to try and deliver on a presidency priority that we have, that the European Union will go to New York in September with a single voice that is not divided between environment groups and development groups. And I think we're getting on that road. We had the Environment Commissioner, we had the Development Commissioner in Dublin. Since that time, the European Commission has issued a single communication. They were going to issue 2 communications, and that communication recommends very strongly that Europe goes to New York with a single unified approach. And we're hoping that that will be endorsed by the Foreign Affairs Council in May of this year. I think also in the context of our presidency, we're together with the Mary Robinson Foundation for Climate Justice, we're convening a meeting in Dublin next month. And at that meeting, it's themed around hunger, nutrition, and climate justice. And what we want to do there is to provide a platform for grassroots organisations who don't normally have an opportunity to get their voice heard on the international stage. We're bringing world leaders. The president of Malawi will be there, Al Gore will be there, there'll be heads of UN agencies there. But the real objective is to get people in international positions of influence to sit down and listen. That doesn't happen very often at international conferences. That's their job. And so that the issues identified around hunger, climate justice, and nutrition can then be reflected in the discussions and presented to the UN task team for consideration for their discussions. So that's where we are really at the moment in terms of our position. I just want to end by throwing out maybe 2 issues what I think is good about the whole post-2015 process. 2 things that I think is not so good about it, and maybe then 2 issues that we need to do some further work. I think, first of all, and again, this relates a little bit to what was discussed early on, and that's about the process. And I think it's good that there is a robust international conversation now around what the post-2015 agenda is going to look like. And it's a much more open process than that led to the MDGs. It's not a perfect process, but it's a good process. It's a UN-led process that has several strands and that has a strong commitment to participation. Yes, I agree that the time limit up to the presentation of the report of the high-level panel is small, but there is a lot of time between now and 2015, and there is a commitment to participation, I think, is very strong. And I think many people who are here today are in a better position to tell us how we can reflect the voices of our partners in those discussions. Second good thing is universality, and again, echoing what was mentioned before. I mean, 2 years ago, the notion that the next set of goals would be universally applicable was a very new notion, and now it's taken almost as a given. And I think that's a very useful concept, because at the end of the day it recognises universally the dignity which we were speaking about that needs to be afforded to the human being, and the importance of putting people and not goals at the centre of any development effort. Not so good things. I think the first thing, again, it's been spoken before, it's either a Christmas tree or a kitchen sink. And that's the tendency to throw everything at it. And I think in many ways what's happening reaffirms the fractured way in which we development practitioners work. We all have our issue, and we all think of these issues, and we develop a paper around it, and then we throw it at the goals, wanting that to be reflected in it. But that's, as Jan said, I think very clearly, it's not going to work like that. And I think we have to have a conversation precisely around what Jan said. You know, because if we have a new framework that's populated with so many goals, it's just not going to work. And we really haven't had that conversation. And how do we reconcile that with our own specific way of approaching it? I think the second not so good thing is that the whole post-2015 process has become an industry in itself. And if you look at the number of meetings, and the research institutes must be delighted because the money must be coming from everywhere. We're becoming almost all consumed in what's going to happen after post-2015. There are needs in 2013 that are not being met. There are commitments that we're honouring all the time that we are actually not we're not actually living up to. Look at the lack of evidence, the evidence that's there around reducing poverty or improving health that we're not applying. Look at the Busan commitments, the Paris commitments, the commitments on aid quality that we are not living up to. And there's a real sense that we get dizzied about what's going to happen a few years down the road and forget about what we need to do today. Finally, I think the title of the conference today really was around, will there be a changed local reality? And I'm going to finish up on this. Sorry, she's flashing. Will there be a changed local reality? And I'm going to speak to that, just two short points. One is, what is going to be the changed local reality for us as development practitioners, as people that are committed and interested in international development? What is the implication of a new framework for the way we organize ourselves, the way we finance, the kind of the interactions that we actually have? And what, for example, if the human rights framework is going to percolate the goals, what difference is that going to have for the way we need to work and the way we need to change our behavior? And finally, if we're talking about universal goals, in an Irish context, what difference is that going to make? And again, what difference will it make for the way government conducts its affairs, the way it prepares its budget? What difference will it make to the way that we as a community need to reach out to other constituencies in Ireland involved in social justice in an Irish context? Because in many ways we don't. Sometimes we do, but we work in isolation. And there's been a dreadful narrative here over the last few years, is why should we give money to the poor people in Africa and deprive some poor people in Ireland? That's a dreadful narrative. It should not be an either-or situation, but the opportunity presented by developing universal goals is a real opportunity for bringing together, I think, groups of people who heretofore are not talking to each other enough. And again, that will require different behaviour, but maybe we haven't thought about that enough. And these are issues that are on our doorstep which will change our local reality, which I think this discussion is raising questions about. Thank you very much.